G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Badges and SA. How you boys doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. Yourself?
I'm trying really hard not to laugh right now because of what just happened before we started recording. But so what this is we had a series where we done two of them, didn't we? Called What Would It Take? And we've decided to relabel it. And SA worked with me on this logo today, and we've done a new logo, haven't we? And so what are we calling it now,
Yeah.
SA?
Top work.
Command and control, because when we examined what the intent of What Would It Take was, it was an individual who would be in charge, what they would do to build the fleet for the purpose. And that's really how you build a fleet. You designate the mission, and you build the supporting efforts to support that mission, which means the individual ships, the budget, the number of crew, all those things need to come together to create a larger picture. So it is the true definition of command and control for a successful mission.
And what's the thing underneath, the Secure Victorum, just so people know?
Just Latin, secure the victory, because it's planning and preparation wins battles. Rushing right in. I mean, I think we see that in the real world today. The more prepared you are with everything, including what we're looking at today, logistics, the more prepared you are, the more likely you are to be successful.
Yeah. So I've actually kind of forgotten because we've done, it's always so long between drinks when we do this because there's a lot of things that got to line up. Like you guys are both got to be free. I've got to be awake at 5:30 in the morning, which doesn't always happen. So that it's only when we're kind of lined up that we can do these. And we've had requests multiple times to do this. Like I was looking at one today and I was going, oh, poor guy, that was from 3 months ago and we still haven't done one. So we did one. I think the first one we did was for what was it? It was four vehicles to
Tonks,
ground.
right?
Yeah, 4 Tonks, that's right. And then we did a Kraken fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think it was the other one. So they're the 2 we've done. But if you've just seen the episode that literally came out about an hour ago as we're recording this, me and Algrid were talking about the Hull C coming into the game. So we thought, well, let's do a convoy fleet. That's a little bit different. And, we know cargo refactors coming in, got a bit of the piracy coming this year. So just to get those juices flowing. And I'll probably, you were saying before the show, Badges, like about you could do this for hours. Like you were talking about how all the different repetitions and stuff like that. So tell me
Yeah.
what you like and don't like about that, so to speak.
I mean, this is just a great thought exercise. I mean, there's so many variables. I mean, when we first started this, we basically kind of, threw each other in the deep end and just went, right, we're going to do a convoy. And it's like, you've got to give us more than that. And it is, one of SA's questions, which was, are we talking a permissive environment, i.e., you can travel with minimal thought to your security? It's never out of your mind. All the way up to non-permissive, which is effectively, kind of war front-esque areas. But that's not it. Sorry, Essay, go on.
No, I was just going to say, or something like pyro, maybe not war front, but, piracy, other concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And but with Star Citizen already at this stage, there are so many more considerations. It's like, well, okay, how many people have I got to play with? What ships do we have available? Because that's going to govern it. So, I think we the parameters we set were 3 Hull Cs jumping 3 systems, and there is an increased risk to merchant traffic. But there's no specific threat to this convoy. It's the idea is we as a PMC org have gone, okay, we're going to escort people to 3 systems across. Who wants in? And 3 Hull Cs have gone, we do. And there's no known specific threat. It's just getting them from A to B as safely and as intact as possible.
I don't know about you two guys, but for me, leaving a little vague like that, there are going to be missions where you will build a fleet like a scalpel, right? And then something like this is more of a blunt instrument because you don't know what you're going to run into. So for me, because we're kind of like so far away from the final game, I kind of prefer to be a little bit open. You know what I mean? And then as it comes out, because that could be the really interesting thing. We could come back to this in 5 years, say, for example, and go, let's look at it again now and what's changed, and go, and it's now exactly for this mission. You know what I'm saying though? Like, cause that could be a really good hindsight. You're talking about thought experiment, like to see how much it's changed.
And if you're not tight on all those parameters, people will go off in interesting different directions. So, and I'm sure there are people sitting there and they're going to go, well, none of you three covered the way I was thinking about this. But that's the beauty of it, is there's so many ways to approach the problem already, it seems.
Yeah. And we'll basically say that if you want to do this yourself, pause it right now, crack open Hangar Link or a Fleet Viewer and do the same thing. We've given you the scenario. Go ahead and do it and check your stuff off against us. Leave yours in the comments and the same thing. And feel free to critique ours as well, because there's going to be... And the funny thing is, I've learnt things from this, right? So the funny thing is, I was thinking about the first time I did this to the time I'm doing it now. And now we've kind of seen each other's fleets. They're similar than they were. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm learning things from you two, and maybe there's things I'm doing. I don't know. You guys can tell me if you think different. But is there things that I've said that have rubbed off on you? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I think, and I'll let Essa go that first, because you look like you might have.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thought, right? So my background is, besides being military, is I do. Trying to be as vague as possible with this, civilian logistics and logistical planning for systems. So like food system, industrial systems, etc. So having that background, understanding logistics at the level that I do, and the other things that we've done, getting your outside perspective, like completely out of the box, like no, like I have shackles on me, right? There's information experience that I have that kind of limit my thought process of, I know this is going to work. This is the way we have to do it. And you've had some interesting concepts and ideas that really kind of pulled me out of my thinking. At the end of the discussion, I'd be like, well, I still wouldn't do it that way, but I definitely see why you would take that approach to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the other thing that you've got to remember is that the military are really good at talking about themselves. So SA and I will quite happily, because it's, well, it's one of those environments that we find it, it's our day to day, or it was at least my day to day. It is still SA's day to day on a semi-regular basis. And it's one of those things that, what seems mundane to us is really interesting to a lot of other people. So as far as we can within the realms of, not giving away confidential information, we're quite happy to divulge. But we've also got to bear in mind that for people like you who don't have that military background, there's a point where you go, now the fun stops and now you're just being military for military's sake. And it's always nice to get reined in again and go, two military fellas, stop, think about this from normal people's perspective. Yeah. Yes.
Well, there is, because there's a bit of the gamification here too. So well, there was something that came up earlier, so we'll talk about that when it comes to it. But there was, and what I'm talking about is the formation. We'll talk about it later, but I
just want to add to that bias too, that military bias. Conventional military doctrine, and this is a gross generalization and simplification of it, is that you want 9 to 1. For every one soldier, one tank, one whatever it is on the battlefield, you want 9 of yours to be able to overwhelm. 3 to 1 at the very minimum in a situation. So we definitely, and I've seen this in Badgers and my fleets, we definitely have taken that approach a little too seriously. And you've kind of called us out on that. You've been like, look, I only have so many friends. I only have so much money to spend in the game and so much time to get people together. I'm just going to do this and go with it. And that's a legitimate thing, because this is a game. This is not the real world. So,
And I think that other thing is you've also got to think of it as World War II in space. So take a couple of generational steps back, and you might find that it's probably a bit more. Well, I don't know. It is a bit unrealistic, this game, in a way, because World War II in space, but 1,000 years in the future just doesn't kind of make sense, really, does it? But you got to see they're doing it for gameplay reasons. They want the dogfighting thing, and I get it all. But
yeah. Because I think literally that was where you say, what is it that you said that we've taken away? For me, it's that. It's exactly what SA's just said there, which is player count. Because I think when we were looking at doing the first one, which was the 4 tonks on a planet, we were coming up with like 90, 100 player compositions. And it's like, even now, back then we were going, you don't even have that on a server. Right now it would be, that is the server. So, you know, we've got to dial it back and remember that back in the day, Warcraft, 40-man raids were an absolute pain in the backside to organize, to get everyone free to be able to do it. And, you know, the same is going to be true for this game.
That said, at the outset, I will say I think I went a little bit overkill this time. So we'll see. All right. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like or dislike, hit that subscription button, and ring the notification bell. We've been hearing from a lot of people that they haven't been getting our videos. I think Badges, you were saying something about you got a notification 55 minutes after a live stream started, which I found kind of...
Yeah, not helpful.
Yeah. Okay, with that, let's kick it off over to the browser, and the first cab off the rank, there we go, is SA's fleet. So, now this is going back to what I was saying about where SA went off at me. If I don't do, this is how he gave it to me. And by the way, it was heaps longer. I had to concertina it down.
Spacing. Yeah.
But I can't see it properly, so I'm going to leave it like this, right? But tell us your fleet. And if you want to talk about the formation, I'll flip over to the formation. You just tell me where you want to go.
Yeah, no worries. With the task of doing, one more thing that we did clarify when we were talking about the parameters of this is that there would be logistical support in these systems. So space stations, potential to hire Starfare, whatever it's going to be.
We never said that.
Yes, we did.
When did I say that?
We definitely did.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I mean, so we're not talking about 3 empty systems from point A to point B. We're talking about the ability to potentially get support.
Okay, well,
and that's why my fleet...
I covered that in mine, so that's fine.
Which is fine, by the way, because if you're a military fleet, you would actually, like if this was a military escorted supply, you may actually have a tanker with you to refuel. So, you know, there's reality to both sides of that. But what I was trying to do was capture the minimum fleet possible logistically to be able to move these in a semi-permissive environment. So to start off with, besides the 3 hull Cs, the first thing was a terrapin automatically. The ability to really have eyes to project forward, I was really tempted to do 2 terrapins, only for the ability to have redundancy. But then I realized this isn't the military. We're talking about moving 3 commercial hull Cs, so therefore redundancy. You know, it's not going to be ship upon ship, capability upon capability.
So just because I'm struggling, and I'm sure there's someone else there watching. I can see the Sentinels. What are the other 2 Vanguards? Are they Wardens or
Harbingers?
Harbingers. Okay. Cool.
So I'll get to that in a.
Cool.
Actually, let's just jump into that.
Yep.
So if you go back to the other image really quickly, you'll see that in the front and the back of the formation, and you can go back now, are a Harbinger and a Sentinel, and they are wingmen, basically. So the idea of having them in the front of the formation is their ability to do pursuit or to do deterrence, where they go directly into the nose of whoever's attacking. They have a really solid firepower on the nose for the pilot control. And in the case of the Harbinger, you have those torpedoes, which is an immediate deterrent for somebody to turn, to bank, to try to get out of your nose. The second thing is that the Sentinel will have e-warfare capabilities, including potentially signal jamming, and the ability to do disruption and the distortion weapons. So the ability to really, that combination seems extremely potent. And even though the Vanguard is not in a great place right now, at least in lore, it's a little bit tanky, it has redundant systems, and it's long range. It's self-sustaining, it has food capability, ahead, people can rack out, and you can even do a 3-man hot bunk crew or a 4-man hot bunk crew if you really wanted to.
Don't know about you, Badges, but I think with the way he said that, if he doesn't call these Sentinel on the nose, I'm going to be disappointed. Just the way he said that.
I can't remember what it's called.
He said
I
like
already did name it, but I can't remember.
Do you see any weaknesses, Badges? I see a really glaring one. You tell me if you see
for the Vanguards, or because we haven't gotten to the Redeemers yet.
I just meant the whole fleet, but yeah, go into the Redeemers.
Okay, yeah, go
if you haven't finished, keep going.
So the Redeemer was a choice because, I mean, the obvious ship that you want to use for a fighter screen is going to be the Hammerhead. It's in a very decent place for cover of fire. The challenge of the Hammerhead is to fully man it is difficult, and you also can only screen two sides of that escort with it. So you have to place that ship in the right spot. So you might do one above, one below, to the side, whatever it's going to be. But you want as much fighter screening as you can. I originally was going to do 2 hammerheads. I went with, because the crew requirements are roughly the same for 2 redeemers versus 1 hammerhead. So, but I went with redeemers only because of 2 things. One, it gives you the ability to be able to reposition. So if your fighters are going after somebody, and you have two groups of fighters, if they're going after somebody, you can move those redeemers around in positions between you and those other ships, as well as break it off and pursue because of that firepower and its capability. Also,
you've also got a bit of redundancy. Yeah, if you lose one, you've still got one.
Yeah. So you're not losing, even though it's less weapons technically, it's a lot easier to bring 2 redeemers onto a target than 1 hammerhead onto a target. So now also, even though this isn't in the game yet, we do know that blades are coming. Mm-hmm. And the idea of being able to utilize blades and redeemers, same thing with the hammerhead actually, to potentially lower the crew requirements, because this isn't complicated. If you get attacked by an Idris, you're pretty much in a bad spot. That Idris isn't coming alone. They're probably going to have far more ships, so that's overwhelming force, right? But if you're being attacked by a group of pirates, I think either fleet would work because they both sustain themselves, a hammerhead versus redeemer. But the main thing for me was that we're talking about long-term, 3 systems, you're probably going to want to run straight through and burn straight through and not stop as much as you can. The things that are missing, why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think is missing, because then I can go into the things that I would do to counter that.
The other thing I'd say as well is you've got to remember you do have turrets on the whole series as well. So there are some stationary kind of gun emplacements. So yeah. I was asked Badgers. I want to ask Badgers first because I see a very glaring problem. But do you see the glaring problem, Badgers, at all?
I think the challenge for this is, as SA said, is your large ship kill. So you have a soft counter to large vessels, which is your sentinels. Is the ability to jam, and they carry EMP, warheads or whatever. So you're not hard countering that large vessel. You are disabling it or disorienting it to give enough time for the whole seas to orientate to the next jump, get out of whatever bubble they're in, if they're in one, and then make that jump. And you can do that now with the new flight modes. You're going to have that. You're going to have the ability to up speed, get out of the combat speed, get into whatever it is, the sub-quantum or whatever it's called this week, but get into that faster mode and get away from the vessels, because if they come up to that speed to match you, they're not fighting you. That's a win for the convoy.
Yeah. All right. So for me,
go on.
Go ahead. If you've got more.
No.
For me,
I had one quick thing.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
If you can switch the image to the longer one, the one that annoys you, and not just for the sake of annoying you, I actually want to talk about it. And Badgers can speak to this. This is actually more condensed than the one I originally sent them. Badgers can speak to this. Spacing on these fleets is extremely important, but the reason you space out is that all of these captains and pilots have predetermined actions that they will take if attacked from a particular direction by particular ships, including looking for ships behind them, off to the side. Everyone has a job, and it's predetermined. So the idea of that spacing is that as you're going, if these ships have to suddenly do evasive maneuvers, they can turn and not hit each other. They have the ability to arc or to be able to break off and roll, whatever they need to do in a predetermined format. And it's very difficult to do that in that condensed format. So the reason why I was so adamant and annoying Execute about showing this image was that it's the general process. And honestly, I don't know if this is the right episode for it, but I'd love for Badgers to get into fleet maneuvers eventually as well.
I do understand, but as I said, like, it was so stretched out that like they would have been this tiny. It would have been really hard for people to see. So I had to kind of make compromises. And again, that's what this is at the end of the day. This is a compromise where we kind of squished them a bit together. All right. So what I think is the weakness of this fleet is actually the Terrapin. And it's not because of what you think it is. It's because a fleet moves at the speed of its slowest ship. So that is the only kind of really small non-range ship in that entire thing. And so therefore, even if it's going ahead, they're waiting for it to get ahead, and then they've got to catch up. They'll catch up and overtake it because it's so slow. So the reason you've got like that terrapin is detriment.
So I'd had it in my head, and forgive me if I'm wrong, because I'm nowhere near up on what promises they have and hadn't made. But I had it in my head that when larger ships are included as a fleet, the larger ships effectively pull the smaller ones in a quantum bubble.
Nope, that is not how it works. It
Okay.
is
Not at the moment.
Well, I've never heard anything to that effect.
Okay.
So,
okay, cool.
But we can check, and maybe someone will let us know in the comments. But from my point of view, a fleet moves at the slower ship's warp speed. It's just like it is in game at the moment. If you warp in a group setting, like where you all warp together, you all warp at the speed of the slower ship's capability. So you stay with it.
My only pushback on that would be, we don't know what the speed of the Hull C's are going to be at this point. We don't know,
but we
ability,
do,
and we know this.
But we do know the Terrapin is a smaller drive than all the others on the screen, and that's why I know it's at a detriment for this. It's very rare that I get to school you, so I'm schooling you.
No. I mean, I'm aware of the Terrapin being the small ship and the capability of being able to quantum at the same as a group in the same formations, but in my mind, what we're talking about is the difference between doing a commercial versus a semi-permissive environment. So right now, at least, we don't have a larger ship with the same flexibility and ability to the Terrapin that is not exceeding the size.
Exactly.
That you want for this type of
there's a reason why I brought a particular ship because of the Terrapin. It actually enforced decisions I made. And you'll see as we go to badges and then we go to my fleet what's about to happen. So yeah, let's
when we I'll talk about mine in a second, but there's certain strengths and weaknesses of the convoy system overall. And completely get your point about the small. If that quantum thing is just something I've made up in my own head. But I would still, from SA's point of view, without a medium that sits in that slot, I would still potentially take that over what you lose to gain the little bit of speed, because you kind of hope that quantum is when you are most likely to be safe.
So what I would probably take in SA's fleet, if I was only going to change the one ship, I would probably switch the Terrapin for an Aquila. That would solve that issue.
See, in my mind, I could definitely see that. That's not a bad choice whatsoever. The downside of that I would see is that, based off of the crew requirements and the design of the Terrapin as being a dedicated scanning vessel. And there is a difference in scanning, right? You have passive scanning, active scanning, and the ability to scan in surveying. So you have different types of scanning and capabilities. This ship is the only dedicated scanner we have currently. That doesn't mean we're not going to get them. We know we will. But in this size, it's kind of funny because the only other ship that I considered was a Carrack. And if we were doing something more long range in a more hostile environment, a Carrack would be a very strong consideration, if not a Polaris.
I considered a Carrack as well. So yeah.
But it's purely because of those abilities to scan for vessels and dangers. And in my mind, the only weakness I see of the Terrapin is that having one set of eyes on scanning is never a great thing. You want as many, like 2 or more sets of eyes on scanning.
Don't disagree. All right, let's go into badges. Oh wait, no, this is mine. Oh wait, we'll do mine.
That was yours.
We'll do mine. All right, so yeah, I think you can see it's similar to SA's in a way, but I went more long range. So I won't go through all the ships like you did at SA, but I'll like to kind of counter your points. I took a Gemini because I wanted to take the fuel for the extra range. I also thought it meant that you could refuel anything, you're not going into commonly known spots. And again, as you said, you can just head in a direct line if you've got your own fuel. Same reasons I didn't have a Hammerhead is you can technically get away with 3 people in a Redeemer. So you can, 3 Redeemers is the same crew size as actually a fully crewed Hammerhead. I brought the Sentinel just for E-warfare and a bit more of defensibility. And then my problem to solve the Polaris problem, the Terrapin problem was a Polaris, because it can go inside the Terrapin when it's warping, and therefore your slower ships then become the Sentinel and the Redeemer, so you are moving at a much faster rate. So yeah, critiques, I guess.
I have a couple initial logistic thoughts. Hitting the task, right, hull Cs first.
Mm-hmm.
My only pushback on the fueler would be large international water ships, super tankers. Okay, the hull E's and the D for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
They may go across the world without stopping, but your medium supply ships, they hit ports, and it's not just to refuel. It's not just to give the crew a break. It's to actually sell goods and transfer goods and not transfer goods. So the idea is to reorganize your cargo, pick up, drop off. So in my mind, when I see a hull C, in my mind, you want to hit those ports along the way, because that's your commerce opportunity. That's your ability to be able to maximize your cargo capacity. However, saying that, although I would probably go with the standard Starfarer, not a Gemini, just for the fuel scoop capability.
You can switch them out. So in this
I thought
case,
that was bespoke.
Nope. In fact,
wow,
it's so interesting. This is actually a really good a learning opportunity. So in game, the Gemini is cheaper than the Starfarer, right? But out of game, it's $40 more, because it actually includes the refineries and the fuel scoop with the Gemini. So you actually get like a full set of gear when you buy the Gemini.
I didn't know that.
Yet in game, it's cheaper because they've taken the refineries off, and it's really just a fuel transporter with armor. So yeah, there you go.
No, I mean that makes more sense then, because you have a more defensive capability. You're a little slower, you're a little more sluggish, but you're more likely to survive an engagement. The only pushback that I would really put, because that really isn't a pushback, that's just more of a defining what the mission is. I think the Polaris, I get why you're doing it, and I totally get the synergy between the Terrapin and the Polaris. I have a Terrapin and I have a Polaris for that purpose. Scanning is the gameplay I'm looking forward to most, because it's going to open up so many doors in this game.
There are some very big scanners on that Polaris too. So
there are.
So it gives you a second. It essentially, you were talking about your two eyes. It gives you a second set. So yeah.
Well, and it's more than likely similar to the Terrapin. So the Terrapin is by the lore a passive scanner.
Yep.
It's looking for signal and pulling it out, not pushing pings. The Polaris is the same thing, but it also has the capability of doing active scanning if it's hunting. So it's like because they talk about in the lore it hunting other ships. It's a fascinating ship. I really am looking forward to taking it out. All that said, it's almost a liability with a fleet this slow. The Polaris is designed as a hit and run vessel. It is not heavily gunned. It's vulnerable when it has to go slow. So in my mind, your biggest target becomes the Polaris.
So for me, how you said you were sending the Terrapin on ahead. I'd actually have the Polaris going on ahead with the Terrapin. So I'd have them both going on ahead, and then bringing the fleet up to the rear. And then if something goes in trouble, the Polaris can turn around and go help. But that was my thinking anyway. So yeah. And again, having the refueler there because it's a much bigger ship and stuff like that. So yeah. Badgers, do you want to rip me a new one just like SA did?
No, not at all. I think the Gemini, the Starfarers, the refuelers, full stop, are an interesting alternative to having a carrier. Because if you can do this in one, if this is going to be a 4-hour escort run, you can do that in one aircraft as long as you've got the fuel. This is why we have in-flight refueling in the real world. So it opens doors for you in terms of the ships that you can bring. So if you wanted to run a pair of Sabre Ravens, for example, in this, having the refueler gives you the option to do that. And one of the things that SA and I talked about, and it's probably a good time to talk about it now, is what this entire exercise has done, has highlighted at the moment there is no small group of player size escort or carriers available at the minute. And the Liberator doesn't count, chat.
Yeah,
comments
too many
before you start. No,
too many vehicles. Yeah, it's good. That's I think that kind of
Can't refuel.
when we talked about this, that was the thing that was glaringly obvious. You'd either have one that does just vehicles or just does ships, and that's my biggest issue with the Liberator. It's like it does a bit of both, but not good for either because it's half and half. And if you're doing vehicles, you'd almost rather have two Hercules. And if you're doing ships, you'd almost rather go a Kraken because it does all ships. So yeah.
Mhm.
Didn't somebody make a Super Liberator, like an art design of a?
So
who
Grim,
was that?
the guy that made this.
Grim did. Okay.
Yeah, Grim.
Sergeant.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic concept because that's a Liberator if it can refuel and repair, not full repair, but minor repair and fire refuel. That would be a fantastic concept because when that actually lands and unloads tanks, it's unloading, basically an entire company's worth of tanks and has actual fighter and air support capability for that.
I do think we may actually see potential variants of the Liberator. I really do.
I hope so.
Because like you go look at the concept image, that inside area where the vehicles go looks so much like a garage bay that you can drive down into. No, it's just all cargo. And I'm like, nah, that just looks so much like a garage. It's ridiculous. But okay, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It just so looks garagey though. So anyway.
There's sorry, just to jump onto the point there is like the Kraken to play with, but again, one of the things we see time and again is for the ships designed to go in combat, they lock their ships away. So the Polaris locks its ship away. The Javelin locks its ship away. The Idris locks its ships away. The Pegasus, the Bengal, all those primary combat class ships don't leave ships on the deck where, if you're caught flat-footed, you can lose them all. Okay, the Bengal's got the ready 5 spot right in front of the bridge on the outside. But that Kraken where your 2 key pads, the shields don't cover whatever's there. So, if you get something damaged to the point where it can't get off, not only have you lost an asset, you've also lost the pad. So the Kraken for me is a poor fit in this scenario.
Yeah, it's a bit too big too, I think.
But, extremely expensive to operate.
It's also got a lot of cargo in its own. So if you actually had a Kraken, I'd almost say take the cargo off the whole season, just put it in the Kraken and go with the Kraken because you've got one ship, you can put all fighters on the deck. That's where my brain goes anyway.
The Kraken's a fantastic escort vehicle for a military escort. The problem with it doing something is, and I think the Polaris has the same problem, but just not quite as extreme as the Kraken. It's the operational cost of that ship for the cargo that you're shipping. You want to maximize profits, and that's one of the reasons why I went up with all small ships, is that 4 Redeemers will likely be less expensive to operate than 2 Hammerhead. So what does that mean? More profit on the bottom line.
Interesting. The other thing is if you go to a bigger ship too, you can only go through the bigger jump points. So that's another thing to look at as well. Hopefully they address some of these issues with the medium carrier. Hopefully. Something like that. I just want to compliment you on your beard there, Badges, and say I found this image that looks just like you. Anyway, moving on. Right, so this is your fleet. Please tell me about it before you burst into anger. Anyway. It was good. Come on.
No words. Anyway, you'll notice that X has also shifted my fleet around, but it's fine because it wasn't in the formation anyway. So look, the first thing I want to say about fleets is historically fleets aren't a great fit for everything. Sorry, convoys aren't a great fit for everything. So convoys work really well against subs and the sneak raiders and that sort of stuff because you were able to drive them underwater where they had to go slower to. Well, because they had to. If you convert that to Star Citizen, going slower means less signature, means more stealth capability. That is not the scenario you would want against one of the surface raiders like the Turpis or the Eisenhower or whatever, because their ideal hunting ground is a convoy where they can just split their fire and tear everything up. So it doesn't work for everything. That said, with this, my priorities are movement, getting away from threats, and having the range to be able to potentially jump one way towards a planet that you have no intention of going to whatsoever, stopping that jump part way, and then turning and then jumping at your intended destination. And what that does is it means that the direction you are traveling from is completely unexpected. And that helps because for quantum interdiction, you need to know what a point in space people are traveling through. And if you've got no predictable route, good luck. So that's part of it. So the Polaris, the idea here is that it would act as a hotbed for the terrapins. So the terrapins can effectively, while one's away, the other one can be refueling and being carried through quantum to the next one. But effectively, they would leapfrog ahead until they got caught up by the fleet, go and refuel. So not only have you got the Polaris's capital radar over the fleet, or the convoy, you also have the terrapin scoping out jump points. They've already arrived, and the next one is already making the next jump and is able to send that information back. In terms of defense...
You don't think you'd have the same problem with SA's fleet because you've got two of them, so the fleet would always be traveling at the slower speed? That's why I only went with one.
Yeah, potentially. I think the other thing is that, you know, for this to work, I think it's likely that CIG are going to massively increase the cooldown on the larger ships versus the smaller. So, and the other thing with this is, of course, is they're not necessarily all leaving at the same time. You could potentially have multiple terrapins ahead of you on the route already, monitoring traffic, getting that. The idea of one of the things in the military, and I don't know if it's the same with the Americans or they use the same phrase, but it's the patterns of life. I think that's evolved now to like the common operating picture or something along those lines. But it's it's the idea of you spend a lot of time in an area understanding what normal life looks like, so that when something out of the ordinary happens, it's so much more obvious. It might be that 3 whole seas, a Polaris and a Hammerhead going through that area isn't just normal and no one bats an eyelid. But if you're not there to understand that, it's much harder to spot when something out of the ordinary happens.
I've actually considered a thought on the Hammerhead for a little while that I've been stewing in the background, is if you can get 4 blades onto... I think it's 4, sorry. 4 blades on a Hammerhead. You could essentially have someone in the top turret and someone in... I think you'd probably have to go with the bottom one, but then it's at the back, so that it becomes problematic. But my thought process is essentially you have a guy at the top, and maybe the front 2 turrets are slave to him, so he shoots kind of forward and up, and then the other guy kind of shoots backwards and down. And so you essentially only have 2 turret operators, but they're controlling 3 turrets at once. That was so again massively brings down the crew requirements, but I don't know how many blades we're going to be able to have. Like we don't have that info yet, so
I mean, even point defense blades. Like if we actually, I mean, I think we're going to get them if we do get them in the end. You're screening fighters mainly, more than likely. If you're screening a larger ship, it's a larger target anyway. The blades are easily going to be able to hit a larger ship. And you probably in this case, it's the small fighters that they're going to struggle with.
Yeah, if you've only got one Hammerhead, I'd almost probably put it in the center and have everything around it, because
except for your ships getting in the line of fire, that's the problem.
Yes, but the other thing is they do have turrets on each of the hulls as well. So when they kind of go into the Hammerhead's blind spot, you've still got turrets. So essentially, it's like everything there, and you're shooting out, trying to kill everything. And if they come in, which would probably be foolish, they're really dead. But you are right. Like, it makes it hard when you've only got one Hammerhead, I think. But yeah.
The challenge with that is actually, and I know that Badgers can talk about this because the naval aspect, this has killed so many friendly fire incidents, so many ships. But we do it also in maneuver and scheme and maneuver for land fighting. That sector of fire and being able to so when, especially if the Hammerhead's using ballistics, if you're doing it in the middle of the fleet, the ability to stop your arc of fire just for that ship and then continue it again as that ship goes behind it isn't only difficult for the targeting aspect, it's that those ballistics will continue to travel as well as the ship that is going in the way. So the danger of having a ship on the interior is that you're actually putting your own ships or your own people at risk. Now, that being said, in my mind, what's more an approach similar to what you're saying would be to put it on top and screen on top and put the other ships underneath it, because then your sector fires everything but directly below you, and then you use your other ships to defend that underbelly.
Yeah, above or below works with a Hammerhead,
Yeah, and I'm going to do. So there are particular tools within the Navy that I'm in the process of getting hold of, and it talks about how formations work at sea. And those formations are called screens. And effectively, it is a formation, but rather than you would do on land, where it's like, right, I want you guys to occupy those group of buildings. You guys take the high ground. I want you guys in that group of trees over there. Rather than that sort of an idea, you basically pick one of your units to be screen center, and everything bases its position on a range and bearing around that ship, which is actually easy. It's something that's possible to do in 3D space because all you do is add a second set of bearings.
Yeah.
Because now you've got a 3D representation of exactly where you should be rather than a 2D one.
Everyone's got an origin point, yeah.
Exactly that. And
sorry,
current naval formations do that now because I mean it's commonly known, and it's not giving away any secrets, but any decent sized fleet has 1 to 3 subs going with it. So it really is 3-dimensional positioning already, and they all have different jobs. One's probably forward, one's a reserve, and then one is actually protecting underneath the direct and listening for directly underneath the fleet. So in a way, real naval maneuvers already have that. If I were to look at your 2 fleets and say, what would that Polaris do? The Polaris would be by itself, and this is pretty much what I think you've said, but the Polaris would be on that route by itself looking for potential interference, scouting, saying, all right, jump, and sending the coordinates back, jump to this point, jump to this point. And it would basically be that precursor, because if a Polaris jumps in on a bunch of retaliators ready to attack, it's going to chew them up if it's ready. So, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Just really quick before I want to say something along what you just said is I remember this back when you were talking about the subs, but I forgot to mention it. There was a really great movie you recommended to me along those lines that was on Apple TV with Tom Hanks called
Greyhound.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. And
really good.
Thank you for recommending it to me. But get back to the Polaris. I actually think there's a ship that we all overglossed, and I did think of it when I was building my fleet, but I ruled it out, and now I regret it. And that's the Defender. Because the Defender is a long-range fighter, and it fits inside the Polaris. So unlike so if you had one Terrapin, you could have had maybe 3 or 4 Defenders, and you could cycle and resupply them all through the Polaris. And then if I drop the Starfarer, you get where I'm going here pretty quickly, right? So that's the change I would make. Going back to my wrong one. Going back to my fleet here, I'd probably now, knowing what I know that I've learned from you two, is drop the Starfarer and maybe pick up, and you could potentially even drop the Sentinel. And maybe get 3 or 4 Defenders, because it would be just so much stronger, and maybe drop a Redeemer. I don't know. I'd have to sit there and think about it again. But you see where I'm going, right? Because of that cyclic ability, you got more ammo, and because technically speaking, you'd have lasers on the Redeemer because they don't have that sustain. You could actually put ballistics on the Defender to kind of up punch. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you're going to deal with threats. So you guys with the Redeemers, with the amount of weapons that you have in there, are obviously going for hard kill measures. I mean, and if it's something that the Polaris or the Hammerhead in my fleet can't deal with, or don't think they can deal with quickly, then I'm not going for hard kill. Because what they used to do a lot in the convoys with the submarines is all you needed was the submarines to go behind you.
Yeah.
Because they were too slow underwater to catch you up, so they couldn't get effective firing solutions, so they couldn't use the torpedoes. And if they came to the surface, they were just so outgunned by the destroyers that they would be forced below again. So what you needed to do was get through them. And here, the Sentinel is absolutely to stay with the fleet. It's not a throwaway asset. It's there to disrupt targeting, to jam, to EMP for as long as it can, to allow everything else to get away. If the Polaris needs to dive at something, like a Mantis even, to kill it.
So I gotta it has EMP right now, it won't have EMP in the end.
No.
Yeah.
But
missiles, EMP missiles.
Yeah, EMP.
But
We'll
the,
have EMP. We'll have EMP missiles and hacking and
Yes.
stuff. So yeah, but it doesn't have
Yeah,
right now.
which is-
They've given it an area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the AMP missiles is ideal because
Yeah.
again it's a range advantage, which
Yep.
is what we're after. I looked at other ships for this. So I looked at the Idris. I ruled it out on the same argument that SA had, which is operating cost.
Yep.
Already were quite high here.
Mhm.
Idris was just too big, but it opens up interesting possibilities because, like I said, I'm operating on one aircraft on the pad, one aircraft away. So the Idris is operating 6 aircraft.
So one other thing
So
I've just realized
Sorry,
is
go on.
the Hammerhead is also fairly armored, so I think it is more of a defensive vehicle. So I don't know how long range that's going to be. Then again, we only are talking 3 systems.
Yes.
But
because at the moment the weakness of the Hammerhead is its range.
Yeah.
And the idea is it sits between the convoy and the target and the incoming. So you've effectively got to maneuver through or around the Hammerhead to get at what you're getting at, which is not ideal in either situation. And the idea is the convoy jumps away again, and that's it.
So
hang on. I've got 2. Yeah, there's 2
Sure.
things I've got to talk about too. And if I don't, I'm going to start forgetting. That's why I'm writing them down. So the first one is because people are going to ask in the comments, why don't you have a Perseus?
Because the Perseus is the ship that would come after this.
Yep.
You don't take the you don't take that ship to defend a fleet like this. This is the fleet the Perseus wants to go after, and this is the fleet the Polaris is going to try and defend with the torpedoes.
Yep.
It's going to run at the Perseus and go, I can take a couple of salvos to the nose till I get point blank and dumbfire a bunch of big torpedoes into you.
Now, I don't know about you two, but I think he just gave us our next episode for this, and it's what would it take
what would kill convoys?
What would take out another fleet? Like, what's an attack fleet? Like, what's the fleet you would take? And we'll pick something that we want to take out. Like, maybe we'll build a fleet together, and then we'll now let's take that out. I think that might be the next episode.
So an interdiction fleet for the next one. Let us know if you'd like that idea down in the comments.
Yeah.
But yes, and that's the idea of the Polaris, is to run at it.
So, SA. Sorry. Yeah, I was going to hand it off to SA.
The 2 points. Your comment on the Defender. I seriously considered not only putting Defenders instead of the Vanguards, but also adding a Merchantman. And the reason why the Merchantman not only supports ships, but its value proposition as a commercial transport far exceeds that of the Polaris, and it's extremely well armed. So you have very, very large weapons and the ability to support your defenders. There's supposed to be organic symmetry to them. The reason why, though, I went away from it was, one, maneuverability, size, support, because then you're also having to defend that Merchantman a little bit.
Yeah.
Although it is well armed. But more importantly, the Vanguards and both the Harbinger and the Sentinel versus the Defender, there's just more flexibility in its capabilities. You have larger torpedoes, you have e-warfare capabilities. So although the Defender would be very valuable, it hits hard and has range. I think the more conventional, even though the Vanguard's not in a good place, and I don't think obviously the Defender is either, but it's not that long range.
They both have issues. So yeah.
The large fighters right now just are not in a good place. But hopefully with time they'll be brought into line. Looking at both of your fleets, one thing I want to add, that if I were to change and add a Polaris to this, it would be if there was sustained logistics in that area. If that were the case, if I were running these 3 Hull Cs over and over again, I probably would incorporate for every 2 groups of 3 Hull Cs, 1 Polaris patrolling those corridors and doing nothing but keeping an eye out for pirate activity and to keep those corridors closed. So it's not that I don't think the Polaris is a good fit for that role. I just don't think it should be based with that individual convoy.
Okay. The other thing I want to bring up that I wrote down, so I didn't forget it, is time to kill. We know they're about to get way drawn out. We don't have armor in the game, all that type of thing. So this is kind of a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is all a bit premature because we can't really get the range there yet, can we? So obviously, like a defender versus, say, what, like you said, the sentinel. I'd assume with the redundancy in a sentinel's got a longer time to kill to a defender. Would you guys kind of roughly agree with that? I'm just trying to show an example.
You'd expect that as a general, it being a heavy, certainly.
Yeah. So
system redundancy is ideal for any ship.
Yeah, so basically certain ships are going to have other advantages that we can't quite ascertain at the moment. So this is a bit of fun, and that's all these episodes are at the moment, is just kind of, as you put it, what'd you call it? You got it a thought exercise, didn't you? Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what it is. Just to get you guys thinking about how your fleet compositions are, and do you have the right ships, and what do you want to do? And again, I think the other thing is coming back to these, few years down the road, they will drastically change as we get more and more information that is given to us, and as things change. I hope you guys agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to kind of hear in the comments or anything from anybody?
I mean, I think just before we go to the comments, I think there's a few honourable mentions, and I think we all must have at some point considered the Carrack.
Yes.
I considered splitting the crew of the Polaris between a Carrack and either a Hammerhead or a Perseus, because the Carrack keeps your scanning ability, and then you can either, if it's mainly fighters in that area, you take a Hammerhead. If you're looking at larger threats, you take a Perseus.
I ruled it out based on the hangar.
And that's what you come down to.
Yeah, I just couldn't get a ship to put in there that would work, and the Terrapin, as SA alluded to when he kind of really talked about the Terrapin, is it's just so superior. I do think eventually, though, me and Algra did an episode years ago on what that Pisces needed to be. I think there is another variant of the Pisces coming, and if you actually remember back when they debuted the Pisces on ISC, it had a scanner seat, right? And we were like, it needs a scanner because the Pisces is the only ship that can go through the small jump point off the Carrack. So the Carrack finds a small jump point. What does it do? Can't do anything. So the Pisces needs a scanner on it to be able to, or at least a scanner variant to go through and navigate that and find it. Hence, I think there is a variant coming, and I'm going to go a bit off tangent here. I think that's a sign of other ones to come. Like, for example, the Cutter. Like, there's only one variant of the Cutter. I think they've realized releasing a series, like, how they released all the Auroras at the same time. People just buy the best one and they don't buy any others. But if you slow trickle out the variants and kind of put them in an order, people go, oh, I'm going to upgrade to that. Oh, I'm going to upgrade to that. And they get more money out of those people. But not only that, you get new people that come along and they'll buy every variant. Well, not.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that's their thought process anyway. So yeah. So I think you can expect to see some more variants down the line. SA, is there anything you'd like to hear in the comments below?
Gosh. So like I said before, I come at this from a professional logistic view and also a military view, and they're very different things. Military logistics and commercial logistics are extremely different. Military is time, place, as we joke, right uniform, right time, right place. So there's a very determined, I need to, we're going to assault on this day. This is the plan. We're going to you work everything back chronologically till that point, and you build everything up to support that mission. Commercial logistics is different. Commercial logistics, you might run a really slow, meandering logistical route, picking and selling stuff. So what I would love to hear in the comments are what types of logistics, if you are going to do this type of transportation trading, what are you planning on doing? What is your org planning on actually doing? Are they going to be running the whole Cs, or only going to be running whole Es and straight lines across secured systems? Are they going to be crazy and take a whole E into Pyro with a whole bunch of fighters and go at each other?
Yeah. Makes me think like our drops to ship discussion, like what you said about the Banu Merchantman. It's very obvious. Like we set it, the scenario as 3 whole Cs, but it becomes very quickly evident there are much better options than the whole C. Like you suggested with the Merchantman. But yeah, So the other thing is setting a scenario like this. It shows you flaws in the setting of the actual scenario. So yeah, I found that interesting. So yeah, Badges, is there anything you want to hear in the comments?
Yeah, I guess just what ships, looking at this, because this is often the best way to identify ships that are missing, is you look at what you're going to do in game, and then you go, I don't really have a ship to do this purpose. For example, you have the Perseus, 6 crew, anti-large. You have the Hammerhead, anti-fighter. Neither of them are very good at doing the other one's role. So what is the sub 10 people general purpose combat ship? Because arguably the Polaris is going to need more crew than that, with its own hangar as well. What is the small group of friends combat ship that has the range of something like the Perseus or the Hammerhead? Because that's not the Redeemer. I would argue the Hammerhead and the Perseus have much greater range than that, because they are
I'd
corvettes,
also,
effectively.
if it's not the Redeemer, I would say that the ship's not quite there yet. I think there are ships, like we know there are more corvettes coming. I would say it's the one you're looking for specifically is not there. I'd say the Redeemer is probably the best for now.
But yes, absolutely, best fit, definitely.
Yeah, but hopefully there's something else coming down the line. I would like to see 2 ratings in the comments. I'd like to see one, who do you think had the best fleet? And secondly, can you rate the beards for me? I'd like to know who has.
Knew that was coming. I knew that was right. That's it.
My beard from just a month ago would have been glorious.
Yeah.
My holiday beard.
All right, then. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. As I said earlier, we've had a lot of people telling us that they have not been getting all our videos or getting the videos late. So through that notification bell, you can kind of set what you want to get and stuff like that. All right. With that then, before Badges horribly murders me, he's been SA, he's been Badges, I've been Execute, and we'll all catch you in the next one. Say goodbye, guys.
See you later. Gents, your hairy privilege is showing.
Just trying to catch up.